Welcome in to the Unblocked Podcast, part of the Unblocked Podcast Network. I'm Keith here with Brian and Coach. We got a special guest today. We're going to have John D. Lukacs with us today, who wrote a fantastic book about legendary sports media member, had a legacy with the University of Pittsburgh. We're talking about the one and only Beano Cook. And if you don't know much about him, if you've ever listened to Tim Brando's show, you'll probably get that name very quickly. So as we get started here, I want to thank Run and Try on Hillcrest. My man Aaron out there, he will get you set up for all your shoes, socks, anything running you need there. You need custom fit shoes. You got that little weird heel problem. He'll figure you out. You know, sometimes the most popular shoes aren't the ones you want to go with, but he'll get you fitted and take care of you well. So go see Aaron at Run and Try on Hillcrest. And as always, we really like to interact with everyone listening and watching out there. So interact with us on the socials. We're on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook or X, but mostly on Twitter. But shoot us your questions. Every week we will answer some listener questions, and hopefully we can get yours on here. But without further ado, I'm going to send this over to Brian and John, and you guys take it away.
John, Beano Cook, larger than life personality, I think is probably a big understatement for him. I kind of knew him whenever Mike was at University of Pittsburgh in the 80s. And as a young guy, some of his one-liners and everything just were great. How'd you meet Beano?
Brian, I met Beano. I wrote him a letter. It's kind of the old-fashioned way. I sent him a letter when I was a senior in high school, and this is way back in 1995. And I said I wanted to cover college football, get into sports media, and I just love Beano. You kind of people of a certain age. We grew up on ESPN, and before game day was really big. I mean, he was that larger than life personality. He would say things. He could sort of elaborate or elucidate in terms of college football knowledge, but it wasn't all X's and O's. He could bring in something about World War II or current events, Hollywood, something like that, and he would tie it all together, and he did it in such a funny way. It was very memorable. And I'm thinking, this is the kind of guy I want to learn from. Plus, there's, selfishly, he's from my backyard. He lives in Pittsburgh. Maybe he would help a guy out. And sure enough, he wrote me a letter back. This is like a week or two later, and gave me his home phone number, told him what time to call, and I'd be more than happy to talk to you, help you out however way I can. And long story short, I mean, we got to be pretty good friends. He was definitely my professional mentor as well. And then he asked me to help him write this book. And, it was one of the great honors of my life that he sort of selected me to do that. And, it all goes back to one letter I wrote when I was 18 years old.
What was he like behind the scenes? You obviously spent a lot of time with him. What was a typical interaction that you'd have with him? I know you rode to Penn State. I read the book.
Right. And the guy you saw on ESPN, on whether it was on game day, whether it was on the scoreboard show, it was the exact same person. There was no difference between his on-air personality and off. Maybe he was a little bit more wary of dropping the F-bombs and all the other normal Beano language. He kind of, muted himself in that regard. But he was the same guy. There was no difference between the guy you saw and the guy you would meet at a restaurant, or you walking into the press box, or coming out of a parking garage, or 7-Eleven, or anything else. That was the way it was. Very, very quick-witted, very helpful, but also very, very generous. A really, really great individual. I mean, he had a very, very big heart. And I think it's something that I tried to get across a little bit in the book with his, the charitable donations, things he did. I mean, obviously a lot of it was, he had a running battle with the IRS. He couldn't stand the government paying taxes, all that stuff, But he donated all of his money to Pitt and the Kiski Prep, where he went to, high school prep school. So that was just the kind of guy he was. He would literally give you the shirt off his back. But the shirts and things he got were all free because, different coaches and athletic directors, whatever. He had so much gear, things like that. So, but that's just kind of guy he was.
What were his thoughts on the NCAA? Obviously, he's been gone for a few years, so I think he was ahead of his time with that. Can you relate some NCAA stories with Beano?
I mean, we kind of get into it in the book a little bit. There's a section early on. Walter Byers, who was the head of the NCAA for many years, he was a character, much like Beano, cantankerous individual. But Beano knew that the NCAA was kind of it was an old boys club, a lot of politics involved, and they looked out for who they looked out for. I mean, they took care of, the big time schools and things like that. And there was a lot of behind the scenes machinations that we get into the book without giving away too many stories. That was it was kind of like operating with the government. There's kickbacks, there's people getting everybody was getting theirs. Let's just say that. And that's kind of the way Beano described things. With everything that's sort of gone on the last couple of years, I think he saw the gambling and all that was coming. He saw that coming pretty far away. With all the NIL stuff, the transfer portal and all these other types of things, which, to go back, the NCAA has no handle on whatsoever. I think he would have been surprised at that. But to be honest, we wrote in the book, 60 years at the end of this month was the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. The week after that, there was a lot of things going on because you didn't know if games were going to be canceled. The pros played, colleges, it was kind of up to each individual school. That was the moment Beano said, this sport needs a commissioner. We need, like an NFL commissioner, Major League Baseball. We need someone to sort of lay down the law, set the rules, make tough decisions. And so he was well ahead of his time with that. And, sure enough, Beano's been gone, 2012, it was October 2012. So 11 years this month, all these things that he was been talking about for the better part of the last half century, they're coming true. It's amazing.
Obviously, some of the one-liners were what I remember best. Can you tell our audience how you came up with the name of the book? Haven't they suffered enough?
That's a good question, and the answer is it's his most famous line. It's the famous thing. The Iran hostages just finally been released. There were 444 days of captivity. Started in 1979. Beano's at the NBA All-Star Game in Ohio, 1981. And all these media guys are in the hotel, and they're getting ready to go over to the game. And there was just kind of a news flash that comes up, that hostages are being released. They're all coming home, and Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, was trying to pull a nice PR stunt. So he's going to give all these guys are going to have lifetime passes to baseball. And somebody, Beano, to this day, I mean, I don't know who it is. He didn't remember who asked him the question. But his first thing out of his mouth was, haven't they suffered enough? He was obviously not a baseball fan, couldn't stand, the sport, and it was just such a great line. Everybody cracked up, and he knew it was gold from the moment he uttered it. And so when I told him, that this book, we were getting close to finishing it, we were working on it. And I said, how about haven't they suffered enough? And I said, it's your most famous line. I said, plus it's, when we decided to go ahead with the book, ESPN was kind of downsizing him. I don't want to say cutting him out, but they were reducing his airtime and kind of, he didn't have that voice out there anymore. He wasn't able to comment a lot of things he wanted to do. So I said, hey, you're back. This is, haven't they suffered enough? They're not going to get rid of you that easy. You're going to be back, and you're going to get your stories out there, and that's will be the way to do it. And he liked it, and so we just decided to go with that, and that's history.
And he had a relationship with Joe Paterno. A lot of people don't realize because they always assume the Pitt-Penn State rivalry. Can you tell us a little bit about his relationship with Coach Paterno?
Yeah, it was a unique relationship. And to be honest, I didn't really know until there were times that I would drive Beano to Penn State for games or different events, and I would see the two of them interact. And I'll never forget, you're growing up in this, 1980s time frame where Pitt and Penn State, huge rivalry. And, bitter enemies. Your neighbor was Pitt, the other neighbor was Penn State, going back and forth. And you kind of think that's how things are like in real life. And plus, Beano going back and forth, he would get in his shots at Penn State, the athletic department, Paterno, the team, whatever he could. But it was all kind of good natured. And I didn't realize until I got up there, and I see the way he interacted with Joe and with Jim Tarman and a lot of other Penn State guys, that it was kind of like a cousin, friendly family rivalry type situation. And they were very close. And the few times that we had gone up there, we were different events, like Bud Tallman, who was the longtime SID at Penn State. The first was his retirement party, and I was shocked that Beano and Joe just went and sort of sat in the corner, the then AD Tim Curley, his house, and this conversation just started. Beano started peppering him questions, about who would he want to face at with the national championship on the line, any coach from history, and all these special questions. And I felt like an idiot. I should have probably recorded it secretly because it was so cool. But they just hit it off. Other times, they were shaking hands and hugging, and it was, it's a unique situation. I know a lot of Penn State fans probably wouldn't want to hear that. That these two guys that they thought were, mortal enemies. I said it's kind of like the politicians. They get on TV and they yell at each other, and then they go have dinner later. Or WWF wrestlers, same guys. They're enemies in the ring, and then after they go out for drinks, after the match is over. And it was kind of like that. But they had a lot of history. It went back. This wasn't just a football thing. They knew each other for many years.
Well, he along with Brando and some of those guys, Lee Corso's still there. They were the godfathers of ESPN, and they made the network what it is today. Obviously, it's changed a lot over the years, but I just remember as a kid growing up, and the other book I really liked was Some Guys Have All the Fun. It was kind of a book about my childhood.
Right.
But what are some of your favorite memories before I turn it over to Keath? Because I know he's got some Notre Dame questions for you. What are some of your favorite memories with Beano?
There's some really good story. A lot of things I probably should never repeat. Okay. I mean, there's things like that we'll get together one of these days in person. I'll share a lot of them. I don't want a lot of things out there, but there was a good story. I remember one time we were driving to Penn State, and I think I mentioned this in the introduction to the book. And the conversations were just really off the wall, and I don't even know where this came from. We're listening to like Sinatra music or something, because when you picked Beano up, he wanted to hear. I had a college fight songs CD, like a mixtape with all the fight songs from Notre Dame, Michigan, everything, even Yale, all the even small school ones that people didn't know, but that he loved. He wanted to hear that, or he'd want to hear like the Sinatra box set. And so we're probably listening to some Sinatra tunes. We're driving up to State College, and he starts asking questions. Who do you think, slept with more Hollywood celebrities, starlets? And so we're going back and forth. I said, well, I know, Sinatra dated Ava Gardner, and he's going back. I mean, his recollection goes back to the late 30s, early 40s. I think Howard Hughes might have had more, Sinatra. And we're going back and forth on all this, this was halfway through the ride. Next thing I know, we're pulling into Joe Paterno's driveway. The ride was over. I mean, the conversation just kept flowing. And so a week later, I get back to my house I lived in with a couple other guys in Notre Dame, and I came home for lunch one day, and there's a button that the lights flashing on the answering machine, the old landline, which nobody really has anymore. So I went over to hit the answering machine, and it was Beano, and it's his voice. He goes, "We forgot Lana Turner. We put her in Sinatra's column," and then it just hung up. And you could tell he had almost. I think he was eating lunch too, because it sounded like he was chewing on a sandwich, and that's just the way he was. There were no airs about him. He was still thinking about that conversation a week later. Something popped into his head. I'll call him. And it was stuff like that. And another good one too. I was a couple friends of mine. We were watching Seinfeld or something at the club we hang out at. And my favorite all-time episode was the one called The Ass Man. Where Kramer gets the license plate for the proctologist and everything. Beano would call me when it was on. If I wasn't home, he would call me like, "Hey, The Ass Man's on Channel 11," and then just hang up. That's the way he was. Just really random things like that. It was like a good friend relationship. There was no, it was first name basis from the very beginning, and he got to know what you liked and what you were into and stuff, and that became something that he would know and talk about. So that's the stuff I miss. And to this day, I still have his number on my phone. I don't have the heart to take it out. Like, it's just always going to be there. So.
And you've got an interesting voicemail. Do you care to share with the audience what your voicemail is? It's one of the more interesting ones I've heard.
Yeah, Beano and I, one thing that besides our love of college football, World War II history is we both love 1970s and 80s TV shows. And he was Columbo, Hawaii Five-0 were his favorites. And Rockford Files, probably in the top 5 for him. That's probably my number one. I always like James Garner. I think it was a fun show. And so he used to have, the Hawaii Five-0 theme song. And when he finally got an answering machine, or he'd always answer McGarrett, Columbo, Rockford, Quincy, from Jack Klugman. And so I just somehow got the Rockford Files answer machine. I put it on mine. So that's kind of just a tribute to Beano. Anybody that sort of knows him and his love of those shows, and I'll change it to Y50, McGarrett 50 every once in a while. So that's still kind of one of those things that Beano's will always be with me, in those kind of ways.
Coach, Keath, what do you guys got?
Right, Keith.
Well, I was going to ask, while you were at Notre Dame, I started going to my first game in 1985. I was 4 years old, going into my 5th birthday. But what was your most fun footballing experiences there? I could tell you that, was it 92 season? I was at the Florida State game, and then the following weekend I was at that Boston College game. And if you want to talk about 2 weeks that just had every range of emotion. After that Boston College kick went in, our original season tickets were actually right between the uprights in that end zone before they expanded the student section, and then they moved us over to the south end zone there. But I went, my grandfather, he lived to be 102, 103, and we started going to games. My parents had no interest. My dad grew up in Chicago and just hated Notre Dame out of spite that everyone else loved them. Right. But we would go to all the games together. By the 90s, I was going to every game every weekend. And I have never seen, at that time, it was a 70-year-old man, the words that came out of his mouth when that kick went through the uprights in that Boston College game was a whole new experience for me. It's like, a good pure Catholic going to England and sitting in a pub for the first time. But what, like I said, that was just every range of emotion in those couple weeks there. What about you? What's one of your more memorable times in South Bend?
Yeah, Keith, I don't think there's anything can compare to that. You went from the top of the mountain in 2 weeks to the bottom of the ocean. I mean, that's just
absolutely.
There's nothing sort of like that. To be honest, in my game attendance lifetime, I don't have too many. I really didn't have a Notre Dame moment, to be honest. I mean, I was at the 05 USC game. I'm on the sidelines because I was working for Game Day at the time, and I had a sideline pass, and I'm there. 0-0-0. I'll never forget this. The clock, the scoreboard. We thought we were on the Notre Dame sideline. I think Matt Liner fumbled out of bounds, but they spotted him close enough that the Bush push could happen. I'll always maintain that the spot was a little bit off. It should have been closer to like the 3, so that push couldn't have happened. But I'm running out 0-0s, triple zeros on the scoreboard, and I'm hugging this random guy, and we're jumping up and down. And the refs are telling us, get back. We're putting more time on the clock. And, there's still another play. And I look at the guy, and we're both like crestfallen because we know what that means. And the guy was Joe Montana. And that was one of the coolest experiences that I had, in that stadium. Unfortunately, it didn't have a happy ending, for us. But what are you going to do? And to be honest, the only other, my first game I ever saw, there was a '93 Pitt game. And it was a 44-0 blowout, which was I felt bad for all my Pitt buddies, but it was cool, to watch, to see the first game there, and it was kind of a dismal, overcast day, but it was 44-0, your favorite team as a kid, you can't beat that. And the only other thing is to go back to Old Pitt Stadium, which you guys will like this story, 1990. The Pitt game, we snuck on the field after the game, and I still have a hat. I keep it locked up, actually. I have all these signatures I got on. I went around, I snuck on them on the Notre Dame bench. There's probably 4 minutes left in the game. I'm handing my hat to Chris Zorich, Rocket Ishmael, trying to get him to sign it and all this stuff. Then I moved over to Pitt. I got Ricardo McDonald. His brother Devon played for Notre Dame. And so my cousin, my dad, and I, we sneak over. We're in the tunnel that under the Hail to Pitt sign. You're going in there, and we kind of snuck in the locker room too. I mean, the security in those days was nothing.
Yeah.
And so I wanted Lou Holtz's autograph. And waiting. He's doing his post game presser and all this stuff. So I kind of snuck under like the police tape or whatever it is, and ran up to him. He's got these two state troopers from Indiana with him, and it's like the Red Sea's parties. They're trying to get out out of tunnel. The buses are pulled up there right at the top of Cardiac Hill, and I stopped. I said, "Coach," I said, "Can I get your autograph? Really big fan. I'm going through this whole line." And he stops, puts his arm around me, and all these people are there. I mean, there's I'm a little kid. I'm like 13. And he said, "Son," he said, "if I sign your hat, I got to sign his hat." And he points to this little kid. And I got to sign her shirt, that guy's program. He's going through this whole thing. And he says, "If we do that," he goes, "I'm going to be here all night. I'm going to miss the team bus. We're not getting back to South Bend. Not going to be able to watch film. And we're going to lose to Navy next week." He says, "You want that on your conscience?" I said, "No, sir, Coach. Okay, And so finally we keep on walking. He goes, "Give me your hat," and I'm standing in front of the bus with him. He's BSing to me and everything else. So those are some of the best moments, and they're some of them aren't even related to games. Just like I said, being there with my dad, my cousin, other people, and that's great moments.
That's awesome. Coach, you got anything?
I will comment on your comment about folks thinking that coaches are like in the old days, like the Cold War,
Right.
But they're really Wile E. Coyote and the dog checking in and fighting all day and then going home and having dinner with one another. I mean, it really is that way.
Right.
And has been. I don't know, maybe social media may have impacted it today, but just, Ara Parsegian. I got to meet Ara Parsegian in 1989 when I was at Miami of Ohio, and when he found out I was from the state of Alabama, he wanted to tell Bear Bryant stories.
Yeah.
And just and again you again and this little quadrant thing here now. I'm the only Southern Baptist in the group, and and as a child, Notre Dame might as well have been the Russians in the state of Alabama. Right. I mean, in the 70s. I was a teenager in that stretch, and all the Notre Dame games, and Notre Dame beat Alabama in the national championship, run the kickback for a touchdown, throw out of their own end zone, and hit Robin, whatever his name was, for the first down. There you go. And so to actually later in life get to meet some of those people and realize that they were not Satan themselves was really cool. Did you get to spend any time with Coach Parsegian?
Yeah, you probably can't see it. This is my General MacArthur corner for my World War II history, but I have another corner with Coach Parsegian's, his famous picture of being carried off the Orange Bowl turf when they beat Alabama the following year at the Orange Bowl. That was his last game when he beat Coach Bryant. It was 13-11, and that was another classic game. He was a great guy. I got to talk to him, and he shared a lot of stories with me, things from even way back, before he got to Notre Dame, because Beano was always interested in how he basically he got the Notre Dame job by beating Notre Dame at Northwestern. Right. So I got to hear a lot of those things too. He was a great individual, and I'm sure he probably would have been the first to tell you that he wasn't a Catholic, getting hired at Notre Dame. And there was probably a lot of the old school, old guard types at Notre Dame, or that was the first one that was outside of the Rockney coaching tree. And he's not Catholic. What are we doing here? But hey, the guy beat us 4 years in a row at Northwestern, so we'll give him a chance. That's what he said. He said I had that going for me, my one loss record, and that's how he turned things around. But no, you make a great point. I actually have some good friends in Alabama. They're big Tide fans, and I've gone to some games there. One buddy he has a luxury box at Bryant Denny, and they couldn't figure out how I was actually, because Alabama's one of my favorites. Not Notre Dame's still number one in my heart, always will be. But I've always rooted for Alabama. And they kept asking why, Yankee from outside of Pittsburgh. We figured you'd at least be a Pitt fan or, something else. And I said, no. I said, here's the situation. So growing up as a Notre Dame fan in Western Pennsylvania, Paterno owned Notre Dame for the early part of the series. I mean, we could not beat them, and it was awful. Who was the one team that always flustered Penn State? Whether it was from the Sugar Bowl, the you better pass, to even the early '90s, Alabama somehow figured out how to beat Paterno, and it drove them nuts because Penn State could, they beat Miami in the famous Fiesta Bowl. They could beat Notre Dame. They were beating all these other teams, but Alabama would always sneak up on them and trip them down. So I started rooting for Alabama that way. Plus, Pittsburgh, Alabama always played solid defense. They had very simple uniforms. Loved the numerals on the helmets and everything. So, but they were just shocked when I got to know them. Like, well, I guess these guys aren't that bad, even though he's a Notre Dame fan and a Yankee and everything else. So there's those connections that these sports just bring up like that. So that's a great observation.
Your enemy is my friend kind of deal there.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have one more question for you because I think we'd be remiss. We've talked a lot about a lot of things, but why a writer? What led you on the path to become a writer? This is obviously not the only book you've written. How did that start? When did that love happen, and how did that evolve?
Well, to be honest, kind of like Beano said, how he got into sports information TV. He didn't think he'd be any good pouring concrete for a living. So, and I kind of realized I didn't want to. I don't mind working hard, but I don't want to, get up and do it every day and, manual labor. So, who knows? But I was kind of fortunate. I had some very good teachers, in different parts of my educational process, starting in, middle school, junior high, they took me aside, hey, these papers are really good. You're like more advanced than the rest of this class. You might have a future in this. So that just kind of gets you thinking a little bit, It's a pat in the back type situation. And, then it's kind of thinking, okay, well, I like sports. Maybe I can do writing. My dad was a history teacher. That's where I get the love of history from and things like that. So, you kind of, I think you just gravitate to something naturally, and that's just kind of how it happened. And you, like I said, you meet someone like Beano, and I owe him my entire career. I mean, everything I did, all the first jobs I got were letters or phone calls, recommendations from him. I think that gives you another idea of the kind of guy he was, because I was. It's not like I'm anybody now, but I was really nobody when I was 18, 19. I'll never forget, I went to Penn State my freshman year, and a lot of people know this, and I transferred to Notre Dame. And I wrote for the Daily Collegian paper in State College, and I was the only freshman that did columns there. And I published a lot of stories, had a good time, and, learned a lot. And I transferred, go to Notre Dame. There was a student paper, a student magazine. They wouldn't return my calls. I mean, I had this collection of clips. Beano said, you got to put together your clips and, your resume and all this stuff, and here I have, Beano Cook on my resume, and no one's calling me back. And Beano, you have been kidding me? I'll make a call. Hold on. The next day, I get a call from Blue and Gold Illustrated, 100,000 circulation. They said, hey, we'll pay you to write for us. I'm like, what? Just on Beano's recommendation. That's all it took. I didn't have to go take over my clips and show them. That was the kind of thing he put his neck on the line for you if he believed in you and thought you were had talent and were capable. And that's again, that things just sort of go from there. So here I am, concerned that I don't get to be a student reporter. Next thing you know, I'm getting paid to do things. So that was, again, Beano Cook, that was his influence, the way he did business. And I'm just really, really thankful that I wrote him that letter, but also that he took the time to write me back.
Awesome story. Appreciate it. Brian, back to you, buddy.
Sounds like he was a great mentor. John, how do they find the book, and how do they find you on Twitter?
The book is on Amazon. It's the best place to get it. Haven't They Suffered Enough? You can just type in Beano Cook in the search engine. I think it's the first thing that comes up. And I'm at John D. Lucas. It's Lukacs, all one handle on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. And We always have a lot of good college football stuff in there, and I appreciate you finding me there. And I think we've been talking about this for a long time, so I'm glad we made it happen. Glad you guys had me on. I love it.
Well, we enjoyed it and look to have you back maybe next season. So, and you and Keath can talk some more Notre Dame football.
So, sounds good.
Absolutely.
We'll go from there. We'll see what happens. I think we still have a couple more fun weeks going on here, so we'll see how this season ends out. Looking forward to it.
Well, thanks
and we
for coming.
do, and we're about to get into that right now. So let's get into some college football talk. Coach, why don't you take us around the SEC? What do we got to look forward to this weekend?
The SEC, Texas A&M at Ole Miss. Ought to be a heck of a football game right there. Ole Miss is still in the thick of things. Looking forward to following that one. I've got Ole Miss winning at home. UConn at Tennessee. Tennessee at home with the win. The Auburn at Vandy. Big game for Auburn. To have a chance to actually have 7 wins going into the Iron Bowl down the road. Looking for the Tigers to win that one. Missouri at Georgia. I think Georgia's going to win the game. I think Missouri won a lot of games early that were against some inferior folks. They played good down the road. They had LSU on the road, so I just think Georgia's so much better than they are right now. Kentucky at Mississippi State. I'm going to pick Kentucky to go on the road and beat Mississippi State in that one. Who am I missing? I'm missing Alabama and LSU in Tuscaloosa. That's going to be one heck of a football game. LSU has looked faster than everybody they've played the last few weeks. I mean, just speed of the game, fast twitch. They have looked so good. It's going to be a tremendous football game. I still think Alabama's going to win the game at home. Jacksonville State from the state playing South Carolina. It's Battle of Gamecocks tomorrow. I think Jacksonville State will play that game closer than what people realize. Rich Rod's done a really good job up there. He's got a good football team, and I think they'll keep it close for a while, but South Carolina will pull away in the end. And I've got the Florida Gators also winning at home tomorrow. So in a game that could be a very, very good football game. So that's my SEC stuff. I did have Troy beating South last night, so that one's already in the win column. So I hate to go against South, but Troy's just a little better than they are right now.
Yep, and they showed it last night. I'll get into it next with going around the bigs, the Big 10 and the Big 12. I'll start with the Big 10. A lot of games that teams just don't need to overlook for their playoff implications. Ohio State with Rutgers. Then you got Purdue and Michigan. Now, the outlier is Penn State and Maryland. Penn State's got a big game with Michigan coming up. They've already got one loss on the record. They can't afford to lose anymore. Michigan is looking ahead. They've got all things going around their program right now. They can't overlook Purdue, and Ohio State needs to stay undefeated here, and that way they can meet Michigan undefeated as well. So that's kind of the things to keep an eye on. Not necessarily any big matchups. The one thing is for the sickos out there, you got Iowa and Northwestern at Wrigley Field, and right now they're expecting that game with the line is at 30.5, and that was as of this afternoon. So expect another low-scoring game in a stadium where they can only play. I'm not sure if they fixed it where they can use the whole field right now or if they still have to play on half the field going in one direction because the new regulations, they can't let the end zone get cut off by the ivy wall. So that's just not safe anymore. Not like the Bears used to do it back in the day. Just cut off the corner of the end zone, no big deal. Going into the Big 12, that's where it gets fun. You got Texas and Kansas State. Texas with one loss on the season. Only to Oklahoma. They need to stay perfect to make their push for the Big 12 championship. You got Kansas State and Iowa State going at it. Kansas with a huge win over Oklahoma. Can they stay into it? Can they stay focused? Because Bedlam is this weekend. Could be the last time for a while we have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State going at it. It's getting pretty close. The experts are picking this to be around a 6-point difference in Oklahoma's favor, but what you got to really look at here is a lot of implications going forward, especially just in the Big 12 bubble. Oklahoma State's got 2 losses they've only got 1 loss in conference, as does Oklahoma. Going forward, and this is where it gets a little more interesting, is not necessarily this game, but winning this game. So Oklahoma next week plays West Virginia at home, then they go to BYU, and then they have TCU at home. So not the most difficult schedule, but a competitive Big 12 schedule. Oklahoma State has at UCF, at Houston, and home against BYU. So they do have a little bit of an easier path where they would be able to win. That would line up more likely a Texas Oklahoma State instead of Texas Oklahoma, which would leave Oklahoma completely out of these playoffs. So it's getting a little tight in that Big 12, especially with that championship game coming up. So keep an eye on those going forward, and it should be a lot of fun. Again, my eyes this weekend are in Stillwater on Bedlam between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. That should be a real fun game to watch. Brian, how about you? What you got in the ACC and the Pac-12?
In the ACC, Duke beat Wake last night. Riley Leonard's out for an extended amount of time. BC Syracuse kicked off. Syracuse is starting to back up, but that's 0-0, about 11 minutes to go on Friday Night Football. Georgia Tech, Virginia. Florida State goes to Pitt. Could be on an upset alert there. Pitt has been playing a little bit better, but Florida State's got all the horses, so we'll see on that one. Virginia Tech, Louisville is probably the biggest battle in the ACC. That's a battle for second place. Miami plays NC State. And then lastly, UNC plays Campbell. Do either of you know Campbell's mascot?
I do not.
Okay. Fighting Camels. I don't know who let UNC schedule the Fighting Camels, but maybe Bubba Cunningham was looking for an off week, and maybe they'll get back on the win track. But Pac-12, you've got Washington, obviously 5-0, USC 5-1, and Oregon 4-1. That battle's going to come down to the last couple of weeks. Arizona State goes to Utah. Cal goes to Oregon, who Coach and I think Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, and I think they still can win it. Washington goes to USC. We'll see how they play this week. They've been kind of night and day, kind of a bipolar team this year, whether they can stop anybody. Stanford at Washington State. Oregon State at Colorado, who just demoted their offensive coordinator. So Deion's making some changes in the middle of the week, so we'll see what happens there. UCLA at Arizona, which will be a decent game. So that's what we've got going on in the ACC and the Pac-12.
Beauty. All right. Well, before we get to the NFL, we kind of skip this part here. We talked about these big SEC games. There's some big NFL games coming up. What is we always like to do a Friday storyline for the weekend. So, Coach, why don't you go first with that? What do you got to eye on here?
Well, I'm gonna back up to Brian real quick on the demotion of the play caller in Boulder, Colorado. I mean, so do you think his advice to him is just like my daddy used to tell me, call those plays that work?
I don't. The guy that took the offensive coordinator left a head coaching job to take the OC job, and he was one of the ones that they, obviously said that was a good hire for Deion. So
right.
It'll be interesting. Pat Schumer, though, is a former NFL coach, so it's not like he doesn't have an experience. So we'll just kind of see the experiment in Colorado if it pays off.
But my one thing going into this weekend has nothing to do with anything we've talked about. It is congratulating Philip and Tiffany Rivers on their 10th child. Now again, the MVP in this obviously is Tiffany.
No question.
Tiffany. They have a 20-year-old and a 1-week-old. 10 kids. Do the math. Tiffany's basically been pregnant for the last 20 years. And I think this is the biggest window between two. This one's 3 years. between children. Philip made the comment that he plans on being at St. Michael's, the local Catholic school here, long enough to coach this child. He said, so I would be 60 years old when he comes out for senior night if I'm able to accomplish that.
That'd be amazing.
He's up in that enrollment in St. Michael's. Congratulations.
Oh,
but
mercy.
He is getting the enrollment up, so they're going to raise in divisions.
No doubt.
Congratulations to the Rivers family, and well done, Tiffany. Hats off to you. I'm looking forward to this weekend. Mine's going to be NFL related. Is the Bears are playing the Saints in the Superdome. So I might make this fairly certain I'm going to go, but that'll be 2 weeks traveling to a Bears game for me, which will be a first time ever, and I'm kind of excited about just saying I've done that. But here's a fun fact. Coach, can you tell me the last time the Bears beat the Saints in the Superdome? They won in 2005, but that was a Katrina year where they played in Baton Rouge at Tiger Stadium. But the last time they were actually successful in beating the Saints in the Superdome.
I'm going to sit this one out.
I cannot, but I'll play along with you. If you'll tell me what year it is, let me see if I can guess who the quarterbacks were.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, it was Jim Harbaugh was quarterback in the Bears. Tom Waddle was playing for the Bears. Mike Ditka was coaching the Bears. And I think Bobby Hebert was playing for the Saints.
Bobby Hebert. I don't know if we're going to go back as far as Archie Manning or not, but okay. Bobby Hebert. I got to meet Bobby Hebert one time at the Manning Academy. A funny sucker. Now, I mean, he just sit and listen to him tell stories and just laugh. I mean, a funny guy.
Was it 88 or 89, Keith?
1991, but very close. Yeah,
my sister was at the game, and my cousins and aunt and uncle.
The Bears beat the Saints in 1991 by a score of 20-17. Now, Tom Waddle was telling a great recollection of that game on the ESPN Chicago radio, and he had the very most interesting thing to say about that game, which I had to go back and look it up, and it's kind of been the topic of it all week. And it's his Jim Harbaugh news that has nothing to do with Michigan. So here's a good Harbaugh thing for you. In that game, the Bears won on the final drive. Jim Harbaugh finished that game with these stats. Now, mind you, this also includes that final drive. All right? On that final drive, he went 3 for 3, which put him at a game total of 5 for 22 for 61 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and sacked 3 times for a passer rating of 16.9. So
rough game.
Before that drive, he was 2 for 19. And that game-winning touchdown was a 12-yard catch by Tommy Waddle, who finished that game with only 2 catches for 17 yards and the only passing touchdown for the Bears. After that game, Coach Ditka came out saying that he loved it because it was just his kind of football. Everybody was just playing nothing but physical. The Saints were actually undefeated at the time. And Tom Waddle was just saying, we were just getting our heads kicked in. Richard Dent was knocking the helmet off Bobby Hebert left and right every chance he could. And at the end of the game, Coach Ditka said it was physical. Anyone could have won it, and we were lucky to take it. And you know what? For once, I'll take the luck. I'm tired of these players having skill. Give me the luck. So I'm looking forward to going over there. I haven't missed a game. I was at that game in Baton Rouge, and I haven't missed a Bears-Saints game against the Saints in either New Orleans or Baton Rouge since 2005. So at the end of the day, I'll probably make a ride over and just grab a ticket. They're about $50 to get in the building right now, but maybe someone will take pity on me and they can laugh at me while the Saints win, and I'll just go along with it.
If anybody has season Saints tickets, Keith will buy you beer to take him to the game.
I will be in full dress up, and you can laugh, and we can hug it out and just be like, yeah, both of our teams are not very good. So I'm looking forward to that, but there's a little Jim Harbaugh history for you. Then it's a little something different. Get off the current media circle that's going around right now. But Brian, how about you? What are you looking forward to this weekend?
I've got my one thing is last night's Thursday night football game was probably the best Thursday night football game of the season, between the Bears and Titans. Afterwards, though, George Pickens.
Steelers
and Titans. Afterwards, George Pickens, wide receiver from the Steelers, after having 2 catches for -1 yard, he posted "Free me" on Instagram and from his situation, and then he unfollowed Kenny Pickett, Mike Tomlin, and the Steelers' unofficial account on Instagram, and he also removed any Steelers things. If you're gonna do that, don't even start with social media, because everybody watches, and I think it's just a road to nowhere for some of these professional players. That's my advice to.
Yeah, and you're right. The George Pickens was, I mean, he has, been an attention seeker since he was at Hoover High in Birmingham. I mean, he's one of those guys.
He had a chance last night, Coach, to drag his foot in the end zone as well, and only got 1 foot in. So he's obviously frustrated, but I think he put the phone away, and you won. So I mean,
yeah.
No matter how frustrated.
Bobby Hebert that night was 27 for 39, 291, 2 touchdowns with a quarterback rating of 97.3 and lost.
That's a tough one.
It's that Bears defense back in the day. Tom Waddle would say, he's like, we'd be going on the field. The defense would get a turnover, and we'd be going out, and I'd be going up to Richard Dent and give him a high five, and he would look at me and say, "Don't screw it up. We'll worry about the scoring."
Bobby Hebert probably deleted his MySpace that night. He's probably so ticked off with the loss.
Shoot.
So, that's good. All right. Well, going into the NFL, there's 4 really key games going on right now, and we get this. The beauty of this is it's the last day we get the all-day NFL package, and with the time change coming up, we get that little extra hour of freedom there, and it all starts at 8:30 a.m. our time. Chiefs and Miami go at it in Frankfurt, Germany. Then you'll have Seattle and Baltimore playing at noon, Dallas and Philadelphia at 3:25, and then Buffalo and Cincinnati for your Sunday nightcap. So, again, that's, a lot of major teams in here. I said a while ago when we had that listener question about surprises, I said Seattle, and they have kind of stuck to it a little bit. That's going to be a very interesting 12 o'clock game. I believe it's in Baltimore.
Yes.
And then Dallas going to Philly. Dallas has been hot-ish, I would say. But either you got anything on that?
I love watching Dallas and Philly play. I mean, that's one of the NFL games that I always try to watch, because they just get after one another. And a neat story in 2000 and January of 2006. I proposed to Susan. We were at a dive down in Dauphin Island. We were sitting at the bar watching Tony Romo drop the snap in the playoff game for the Cowboys and the Eagles. And I'm trying to get back to the seats where we first had our first date, so I can propose to her. And in the meantime, these two ladies are sitting in those seats. I can't get the seats, so we're sitting there watching this NFL game, which she has no interest in whatsoever, strictly because I want to get these seats over here so I can propose to her and hopefully, become engaged. So that game always comes back every time I hear Dallas and Philly, for obvious reasons.
Coach, we had a good talk a couple weeks back about those Dallas Niner games back in the 90s and all. Has that kind of become the Dallas Philly thing now? Just with the intensity and the physicality that they go at each other with?
Anytime I get divisional games in whatever division it is, are more important. And now that Philadelphia, over the last, has stepped their game up big time, and with in the way their physical nature being like a our guest said a while ago. I mean, those towns, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, they thrive on old school, hit you in the mouth, run the ball, be physical defense. Those original teams from the NFL, they still harken back to those days, and they're fun to watch. And Cowboys are still always, I don't care, they're always viewed as the soft America's team. They just always, since day one, that's what they've always sort of been thought of. And even when in their great days, they won with great skill, other than the doomsday defense, time. So it appears to be a clash in philosophies when they play, just because of looking back to those old days, no doubt.
I'm all for the international games, waking up early in the morning and having NFL all day, though. It's like heaven for me. So I'll be by the TV for the next 2 days.
There you go.
I'm down. Well, on that, we're going to wrap it up here. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and joining us today, especially John, our guest. Check out his book. And again, if you're not familiar with Beano Cook, look into it. He was a fantastic character. Obviously, you can hear he's a very intelligent man, a great mentor to John. And just his sports coverage was unmatched. And as Brian said, he basically got that little platform we know as ESPN really off the ground and cooking back in the day. So we want to thank Run and Try for sponsoring us on Hillcrest. Go see Aaron, my guy, for everything you need there. And, of course, all the social media. Like, follow, subscribe, and most importantly, interact with us. Twitter is the best place to find us, but you can also get us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube as well. And on that, if you've got a question for us, hit us up on the socials, or you can email us. Maybe you got an event you want us to mention, or you yourself want to be our featured sponsor on this show. You can hit us up there at unblockedpod@gmail.com. So I'm Keith for Brian and Coach, saying we'll see you on Monday, and enjoy the football this weekend, everyone.
All right.